As Dune Part 3 is coming to screens, Irulan will finally move from the margins of the story towards the center. And today we are going to understand exactly who she is, what she does, and why her arc in Dune Messiah is one of the most quietly devastating of all. To understand Irulan's arc in Dune Messiah, we have to understand what she represents at the end of Dune 2. When Paul Atreides defeats Shaddam, he does something calculated and cold. He doesn't take the throne through power or something. He inherits it through power, through conquest, and then he legitimizes it through marriage. So Irulan, the eldest daughter of defeated emperor, becomes his imperial consort, his wife in name only. And that is the deal. Paul makes it brutally clear that Chani, his Fremen lover, is his real deal, the real partner. Sorry for the outfit change. Now let's get back to the video. Irulan Carino, the eldest daughter of the defeated emperor, becomes the imperial consort, his wife in name only. This is the deal. Paul makes it brutally clear. Chani, his Fremen lover, his partner in desert war, is his true companion. Irulan is a political instrument. Now think about it from Irulan's perspective for a moment. She is a princess of House Corino, a dynasty that has ruled the empire for 10,000 years. She is a Bene Gesserit trained person, meaning that she has spent her entire life being shaped into the most capable human being alive. She can read micro expressions. She can control her own body chemistry. She's a historian. She's a writer. She's a political commentator of the highest order. Paul himself acknowledges it. He once says to her, and this is essentially a compliment wrapped in suspicion, he said that that's a real princess down the hall. She was raised into the nasty intrigues of this imperial court. Plotting is as natural to her as writing her stupid history. He respects her. He just doesn't want her. Obviously, because of Chani. And that's the gap between what Irulan is capable of and what she's permitted to do, and is a wound at the center of her entire story. Dune Messiah begins 12 years after the fall of House Corino, 12 years of Paul's jihad spreading across universe, a holy war fought in his name that has killed almost 10 billion people, a number so vast then you can barely register it. Paul is haunted by it, trapped by his own prescience, watching futures he cannot escape. And Irulan, she has been living in the imperial household on Arrakis, present at councils, advising, writing her historical accounts, watching Chani always. As the years pass, no heir comes, and Paul's concubine, she somehow become barren. Because here is one thing, Irulan also want a child, not purely out of marital longing, though it may be a part of it. She wants an heir of her own. It would be her legacy, her power, her survival. And the Bene Gesserit needed it too. The sisterhood has been running this genetic breeding program spanning thousands of years. Paul was that being, the Kwisatz Haderach, produced outside of their control, obviously. So they are furious about it, frightened of him. And despite to want to regain the influence over House Atreides' lineage, Irulan is their instrument inside the palace, and Paul, with his prescience, almost certainly knows this side of the story up to some level, and yet he keeps her inside the council, keep her close. Whether this is pragmatism or compassion, or the cold calculus of the man who have seen enough futures to know exactly how it is going to play out, we cannot be certain. But Irulan is not passive, she has been acting. For years and years, Irulan has been secretly administrating contraceptives to Chani. She's been slipping them into her food, ensuring that no matter how much Paul loved Chani, no child would come from that union. And that is not an act of a villain twirling in cape. This is the act of a desperate woman, pressured by one of the most powerful institutions in the universe, acting out of frustration and grief and ambition, tangled together. This is the intimate betrayal, if you know what I'm trying to say. The kind that happens when the household within The kitchens, the small invisible moment of domestic life, not in the battlefield it happened. So the Bene Gesserit, particularly the Reverend Mother Guys Helen Moya, are the devising force behind this. Their goal is to force Paul towards Irulan to produce an heir under sisterhood influence to keep the hands on the throat of history until it doesn't. Chani, trusting her feminine instincts over imperial luxuries, returned to traditional high melange desert diet. The contraceptives became ineffective and she became pregnant. This is the moment where everything began to fracture for Irulan. Mohiam, cold and relentless as ever, urges Irulan to go further, to chemically abort the pregnancy, to end it before it threatens her position as the empress. And here where we see shift in Irulan, she refuses, or at least she restrains. This line, whether exactly to fall in her internal landscape, she never crossed. Not yet, perhaps not ever. It is a small moment, but it is a first crack in the walls between Irulan, the conspirator, and Irulan, the woman. And Chani finds out. She discovers that years of sabotage, the damage done, the contraceptives have caused lasting harms to her body, endangering that very pregnancy. She wants to kill Irulan. Paul stops her, and this is one of the most haunting details of this entire novel. Paul, who can see future, know that Chani will die in childbirth. Grateful. He was grateful for that because Chani get to live long. So he has been trying not to see this future, trying to find a path around it, but there is none. Now comes the conspiracy to kill Paul Atreides. Irulan is not the architect of what comes next. She is a piece on board built by others. The great conspiracy against Paul Muad'Dib Atreides involves some of the most powerful forces known to the universe. The Bene Gesserit, threatened by his prescience being outside of their control. The Spacing Guild, whose monopoly has been threatened because of Paul's control over the spice supply. The Talai Laksu, the genetic masters, the manipulators, deeply oppressed by Atreides' order. And the master stroke is the Gola, a being grown from the cells of a dead person. They gift Paul a Gola made from the dead body of Duncan Idaho. He's the most loyal friend who died in the first novel, and they name him Hate. I think I have told you about Hate many times now. The goal is a psychological warfare to destabilize Paul, to make him grieve again, to distract him, to probe him towards to his, prophetic visions with something he cannot easily predict. Because Hate is a new kind of being, somewhere between a man and a ghost. Critically, the guild navigator, Edric, I think his name was Edric, shields the conspirators meeting from Paul's prescience. He is a living blind spot, a bubble of uncertainty in Paul's otherwise sweeping visions of future. Edric is a very important person in this story, and I'll make a short about him. I think I need to make a short for him. So Irulan is their insider set. She feeds intelligence from the court, and she has been already using contraceptives against Chani, so she attends the conspiracy meetings. And I think that still from the trailer is one of those meetings shot. But she's not driving this, she's being carried by it, swept along the momentum by older, colder, more calculating minds than her. And then somewhere in her, that Bene Gesserit training, the historian's eyes, she's watching herself become something she did not entirely choose to become. The conspiracy culminates into this stone burner attack, and I will make a video about this in the next video. I mean, not here, in the next part. So you have to subscribe to my channel for that. Chani goes into labor. She's carrying twins, Leto and Ganima, and the birth is catastrophic. The damage done to her body over years of contraceptive sabotage has taken its toll, and Chani dies. And with her death, something in Irulan breaks. Not the conspiracy, not the political calculus, something human. She wails, she grieves openly, and she reveals the Bene Gesserit, her sisterhood, and the institution that shaped entire every cell of her being in raw, unguarded anguish. She declares in grief and brutal honesty that she loved Paul without even realizing it, or perhaps what she loved was the life she was never allowed to be, beside Paul Atreides. The closeness without intimacy, the years of watching. This is truly heartbreaking. As a woman, that's very heartbreaking for me to just see. This is a confession that cost her everything she was and gives her something realer. She vows that in that moment of grief, she dedicates her life to Leto and Ganima, Paul's children, the heir she never bore. She will teach them, she will protect them, she will be the mother to them. This is what is going to happen to Irulan and what Alia is going to do to her, because Alia is the regent at that moment. So you need to subscribe for that, because I'll make another video for that also. And if you made this far, you are a lore junkie. Congratulations. Drop a comment below what you like about this story and what you want to hear in future, because those stories are waiting. I have so many videos planned. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.